Okay, and welcome to the sustainability series. Now, this series is all about men who didn't just get back in charge, but they've stayed in charge. And the thing is with most health transformations is that between 85 to 95% of men that make a change end up going back to where they started within 2 years. But what we're going to be sharing with you are men who defied those odds, men who actually got back in charge and they've actually made the sustainable change. Now, today I'm joined by Rob Avery, and Rob completed the back in charge. He completed the back in charge blueprint around about 23 months ago, wasn't it? It was a good time ago. Yeah. And it was around about this time 2 years ago that we initially partnered together. And what we're going to do is this conversation isn't just about like what happened during the program. It's about what's happened after. How has he been able to deal with setbacks? How has he been able to deal with the work demands, with life, and fundamentally still be able to stay in charge of his health? So, Rob, thank you so much for taking the time out today and having this conversation. Okay. So let's jump straight in, shall we? Let's get into it, Rob. So, Rob, I wanted to just take us back 2 years ago. And I just want you to reflect on what was happening in your life when you realized that your health was slipping out of your hands.
So I'd been crash dieting sort of every early part of the year to get rid of the weight that I put on prior years, and I was finding that kind of worked 20 years ago. It didn't work so well 10 years ago, and roll the clock forward to when we met. Sort of 15 to 20 years into doing that every year, it was taking longer. I was losing it. I wasn't keeping it off for as long. I was feeling, not that I really connected this directly with, weight and mental and health and all the rest of it, but I just accepted I was feeling a bit older. My memory was getting worse, getting a bit foggier. I could feel myself perhaps being a little bit slower. And I just put that down to natural aging, right? None of us are 20 anymore. And I spoke to somebody who is a mutual friend of ours, and he is a tough guy to keep happy. And he's very demanding, and he had similar challenges to myself. He'd done your program and he was raving about it in a way I don't often see him rave about much. So I was just interested to explore it. But I think I was recognizing that, getting a bit older and, my mindset's changed slightly from where I was then, but I was, thinking of retiring quite soon at that time. And I thought, I want to get this sorted out. I want to try something that's more sustainable, something that's more longer term, something that isn't putting a plaster on that, inevitably falls off. I think we called it, when we were working together, Adam, the staircase. And, to the audience, what we meant by that was very much, you put a bit of weight on over a year, but you wouldn't quite lose it all. And then the same would happen the next year, the year after that. And whilst a couple of pounds or, 3 or 4 pounds isn't really a big deal in an individual year or two, before you know it, and I always talk in old money, you're a few stones up on where you perhaps were 5 years ago. And it just very quickly accumulates, and it's just not sustainable.
No, that's it. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's like when you're in your 30s, you can handle that. Oh, okay, well, I've put on an extra few pounds this year. I've put on an extra couple of pounds. Oh, I've done it again this year. And that's fine. I've got time. I've got time, I've got time to deal with it later on. But the thing is, though, with people, men, especially men, right, as we get older, not only are you gaining weight, but from all the times that you've been trying it, the belief starts to go down, right, in that staircase. So not only is the weight going up in that staircase, like me and you both said, the belief is starting to go down year on year and year, right?
Acceptance kicks in, doesn't it?
Yeah. Exactly right. Exactly. Now, when you said earlier as well, like just want to touch upon it. You said like you just felt things were slower, like you were slowing down, and you were, like not really on it as much. Like in what context are you talking about?
I think generally in life, I was feeling tireder. I wasn't feeling so energetic. That if I think back to a few years before that, just some stuff was getting a little bit harder. I'm not saying I was struggling to climb up a flight of stairs or anything like that, but I'll give you one example. I might have mentioned this before, but if I think back a few years ago, if I had to run for the train, I'd get it. And there was an occasion where I was running late. I had an important 9 o'clock meeting. I normally go in a bit earlier, but that day I wasn't. And I really ran for the train, and I just about got it. And I thought, God, I'm about halfway through a half-hour journey, and I'm still out of breath. I'm still like, ugh, that can't be right.
No,
and it's those little signs.
It's little things. Sorry, I'm not smiling for the fact that you couldn't make it. I'm smiling because I remember, in fact, I've still got it on my phone of you sending me a message saying, I've just run for a train and I'm not out of breath.
Yeah,
that's why I'm smiling. I'm not smiling.
Ago,
yeah, that's it. I'm not smiling, oh yeah, like you're out of breath and you couldn't make it. No, I'm smiling because I remember, and you changed that. And that's the thing, right? You're running for a train, and again, it's like you leave the meetings a little bit late, or, and it's also on the way home as well. Like, how many trains have you potentially missed over the years because, you couldn't walk that little bit quicker? You couldn't have that little run if needed be, and that, that's it.
It's a plus, isn't it?
That's it.
Simple example.
Exactly. So going back right before, like, what things had you tried previously, the Back in Charge blueprint, to lose the weight, to improve the energy?
So I think I touched on a moment ago, the classic, you get through Christmas, it's bleak January, you stand on the scales on the 1st of January or the 2nd once festivities stop, and you think, oh, that's a bit higher than it was last year. So I used to go on a crash diet to do everything I could to lose what I'd put on in the prior year. And initially, that's generally quite successful. I'd either lose all, a little bit more, or a little bit less of the weight that I put on the prior year. But the devastating thing about it is it lasts for a metaphorical 5 minutes. After a few months, it's crept back on. You kind of get into the summer and it's going up again. You get into the winter and it's going up again. And there you are the following year in the same place or worse. So I think the main thing I tried was those crash diets. I tried a few other meal-based diets, just focusing on protein, but got pretty bored of it, wasn't really seeing results. And of course, it's obvious now, but I was just taking one, sounds a bad analogy, but bear with me. I was just taking one slice of the pizza pie and doing that in isolation instead of what we did, which was taking the whole round. And yes, diet and protein is really important, but it's just one of a number of steps. So I think I just tried dipping out of doing individual, simple little things that ultimately weren't successful.
Nice. And that's the key there, isn't it? You was just having one piece of the pie.
Yeah.
When in fact, we cover a hell of a lot more than just that, don't we? So, so well done. So I know you touched upon it as well. Like you had a conversation. It was actually with Paul. It was with Paul, wasn't it?
It was Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Paul. Right?
Hello, Paul.
Hello, Paul. Hello, Paul. Paul is joining us in a few weeks anyway, so we'll be sharing his story then anyway. But before that conversation with Paul, what was the moment? Can you remember it? Like the moment when you realized, no, I need to do something different, because like you said, for years on years, you had always done crash diets. So what was the moment when you were like, you know what, I need to do something different?
I don't think it was a specific moment. I don't think it was like, I woke up one day
An
and thought,
epiphany? No.
no. But I think it was a gradual realization over a number of months, probably the year before. It was just one of those iterations where, there's always excuses, isn't there? Work, holidays, all that sort of stuff, eating the wrong things, challenging times. But I was particularly disappointed on the prior year because I think I attempted the sort of crash diet approach that year, not just for January, not just for February, but pretty much up to my birthday, which is around the middle of March. And I still hadn't lost the entirety of the prior year. And I think I was at the F.K stage that we also talked about, which was just, I think I got through the acceptance of it and just realized, I want to do something about this before it's too late. If I think of friends who are 10, 15 years older than me, there's a couple who, for whatever reason, haven't done anything about it. And I can see that they potentially never will because they've just left it too late. And I'm talking about people in their 60s, 70s, when, I'm not there yet, but I can see already in my life as I am closer to 60 than 55, that it gets harder with every 5-year block. So I just wanted, if I was to pick a moment or if I was to pick a realization, I think it was just that I was getting a bit older, and over a few months I was thinking, look, I need to try something else. So the chat with Paul came at the right time, really, Adam.
Nice. And again, like you're talking about, friends, colleagues that you've seen that they've just, they're not going to change now. They've got into this like acceptance. You mentioned it earlier. Where your weight is growing up like that staircase year on year. The belief is then coming down, down, down. It's reducing year on year as well because you're not getting any more results. So then they just settle, don't they, into this level of acceptance.
It's easily done, right? It's almost the default path if you don't deviate from it.
There you go. That default path, right? Again, you're referencing the program, 2 years
yes,
on it. Yeah,
actually.
See, there you go. Hey, exactly. That's it, right? That's what we want. Yeah. That is what we want, right? So what was your, like, thinking back to our time together when we were partnering together, okay? Like, what was your experience of the Back in Charge blueprint, and what surprised you the most about it?
So the experience was very good. As you may remember, I came into it optimistic but cynical. I think that's an honest appraisal of where I started week one.
It's a lot of guys.
Yeah. And I love the gradual build-up of things. I love the fact that if you'd spoken to me a couple of weeks before I started, I just had this horrendous fear that I was going to get hit with everything on day one, and I was going to be expected to just suddenly do all these things, because I had a bit of a preview of some of the stuff that happened, but I hadn't understood the timeline aspect that we gradually build up these habits. My biggest surprise was nothing to do with the physical. I think the physical outcomes I kind of was optimistic about, and they were a very pleasant surprise that they worked. But what really surprised me was the mental aspect, the real benefits of getting into those habits. And it sounds so simple, but for whatever reason, I hadn't managed to think of it myself in 20 years. And just disciplined habits like tracking your measurements, tracking your exercise, tracking your steps, tracking, you've got the right hydration, getting more sleep. It sounds simple, but I needed a framework and a structure to kind of get into that. I wasn't going to do that by myself.
No, and that's the thing, right?
That's the biggest surprise, really. That sort of mental mindset side of things. I hadn't really thought that was going to be an outcome, when I first signed up.
Yeah, it's like the shift, right? We track everything in our lives, don't we? We track our numbers in our account, we track our money, we track everything. We're tracking this at home, we're tracking this at work. But when it comes to ourselves, it's like, Oh no, why do we need to track? You know, how many steps?
Absolutely. I mean, in the day job, you know, if you don't measure anything, you can't see where you are. It's just weird that I and others perhaps don't associate that obvious thing with sort of seeing where we are on the, you know, be it the scale, be it the waist measurements, you know, be it how many steps you're doing, and that discipline I think really helps.
Exactly
Helps keep
right.
you on track.
You know, again, we're going back to the program. It's like we say, what gets measured gets managed.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, exactly. So Rob, fast forward to now. Okay. Now, what does staying in charge look like in your everyday life?
Different to what I might have thought, like seconds after leaving the program. It has evolved.
Yeah, of course.
Um,
Right. Everything does.
what you walk away with is a toolkit that you didn't have before. And I think what's really important is to acknowledge that life carries on, and there are going to be some events that happen where you are going to slip off the rails a little bit. But the difference between after the program and before the program for me was you've got the toolkit to quickly adapt to that and reset it, whereas previously you didn't have that toolkit. So I'll give you an example, right? The obvious one. You go on your summer holiday with your family for a couple of weeks, you really enjoy yourself, you eat too much. You know, previously I might have come back from that and that would be, well, I've put a bit of weight on, so that's that for this year, isn't it? Whereas you just jump back into the habits and literally, you know, a day or two after coming back, you're back on track. And then you have the positive mental benefit of seeing those few pounds you've put on holiday drop off quite quickly before it's a big deal to get rid of them.
And
so that's how I've kind of adapted to things, I think. I think it's really important not to religiously beat yourself up and worry about every meal you go out for or every pound you put on. I think you're just going to break yourself mentally if you try and do that. I mean, I'm talking generally. That's certainly my feeling. But this year in particular, I've worked abroad a lot, and you know it's great fun going out with colleagues for meals when you're away. And boy, that's had an initial impact, and I've had to jump back into those mindsets pretty much as soon as I've got back to lose the gains that I had on those trips. But it's been successful. Right now, talking to you today, if I was to give a statistic, bearing in mind I did lose a ton of weight on the program, I've probably maintained about 75%, which I'm happy with as a rolling target. But you know what? I'm pretty motivated to just carry on doing the habits over the next few weeks before the Christmas madness, and just keep it level. You know, keep investing in it. You'd invest in your portfolio. Why wouldn't you invest in yourself and your health?
Exactly right. And what I like what you said there is about, you know, it's about like holidays.
Yeah.
Okay. Like you go away on holiday now for you as well. You've been working abroad, like you've been to New York and
I've been.
You've been all over, right?
Trip to Boston
Yeah,
this year. Yeah,
that's it, right?
Lovely city, great place to work,
great food,
great places to go out as well.
Yeah, exactly. But again, you know, but this is the thing. People think that when they come to lose weight, improve their health, they need to do radical things. You know, they need to cut everything out. They need to start living like a monk. You know, they need to just be in solitude. But you can't, you know, let's be honest, right? You can't enjoy a holiday like that. You know, like you're saying as well with work, you know, you can't, you know, you need to build those relationships at work. And, you know, with the industry, it's always done over a meal, or, you know, I know for you, like you don't drink, but, you know, for other people, they, you know, it's alcohol is used. So for you, it's like previously, like you said, you get to straight back on it. Like now that time between you finishing a holiday or finishing a trip is now reduced. Like you just get straight back on it. How has that really improved previously? Like how long would it have taken you previously, would you say, from having that holiday or work trip to then, you know what, I need to get back on it again?
Sad but honest answer is probably after the summer holiday, I'd probably largely, not do anything about it. I'd just think, oh, I'll put that weight on. I'll wait till next year.
Wait till January.
That's the honest answer. But it's nice to have a different way of dealing with that challenge. That actually, once it becomes a habit and once it becomes ingrained, isn't much of an effort. It really isn't.
Does it feel like routine? Does it feel?
It feels very routine. It feels it feels very routine. It's like everything else. It's as routine as jumping on the train. It's just you start the day with a nice healthy liquid vitamin drink. With your sea salt, have your cold shower.
Okay, there you go.
Get you on the train.
And you're running to the train. Nice, cool. So Rob, tell me, what has improved? Apart from health, right? What else has improved since you finished in the back in charge? Because as you know, we talk about the 4 Fs. We talk about your health, your fitness. We then talk about your finances, which is your work, family and friends, and also your faith, right? Your inner confidence, yourself. How else have those areas have they been improved?
I'd say so. I mean, we can all get tired and a bit short at times, and I've found that's improved. I found temperament's improved. Let's pick another one. I used to get a lot of end of day headaches, particularly when I was tired. And I haven't had them since doing this. That has gone away. I still get the occasional visual migraine, but that's a completely different category of stuff. But that habitual, it's the end of the day, bit of a headache coming on, that's gone. Sleeping better, generally more with it, I think, particularly of an evening. Nice. They're the benefits that I've seen.
Nice. When you say
and they're not to be underestimated, and others have seen as well, actually.
Have they?
Yeah. So
nice.
Family have sometimes noticed on a good day, a bit more alert.
Yeah, is that a good thing? You being more alert on a good day?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Say so.
Yeah, nice. In what way would you say that they've noticed, improvements?
Well, just that you're, you can be in the room but not there. After a particularly challenging day, just a bit more chilled, really. Not all the time, but more of the time, right? It's always gradual improvement.
Well, it's it, right? That's the thing. That's it, right? We always have days. We all have days. And sorry, just then you mentioned about sleep has improved. Now, in what way would you say sleep? When you say your sleep has improved, well, in what way is it? Is it like you're not having as broken sleep now, or you just going
got better at having more sleep. So I improved the hours, but also I was regularly waking up at points during the night pretty habitually, and most nights I sleep through now. So you can't really knock that. It gives you a good start to the next day before you even get going. Nice. Again, simple fix, but you kind of need to work through it to realise and get there.
Exactly, right. So you're getting better sleep, waking up with more energy, so then you've got more energy to use throughout the day. Nice.
Good summary.
And then that's it. And then how has that then traded off into your work? Have you seen any notices since doing the program in your work output?
Yeah, I mean, I've always done my best to try and chomp through quite a lot anyway. But I have found it easier to multitask, I think, actually.
Male multitasking?
I know it's a success, isn't it? Particularly when you're context switching as well. When you're doing different things, and I think that's just the mental alertness improvement, really. I think that's really helped with that.
Nice. That's really cool. That's really cool. Again, because you're just becoming more productive.
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that's what you want to do, right? That is what you want to do. So Rob, like last word again, thank you so much for taking your time today.
Absolute pleasure. I got such a lot from it. Always happy to do these.
Nice.
Yeah.
But for any guys, any men that are watching this and they're feeling a bit stuck, right? And a bit like you, like for you, year on year, you was always, January the 1st, you was doing it and you was waiting, like you're saying, you're signing off in the summer and just waiting until January to restart. And they're just feeling stuck and they're not knowing, what to do or where to turn. Like, without just saying, just do it. Like, what piece of advice would you give them? Like, what would you want them to say? No.
I would say, don't be afraid to try something new. Don't be afraid to try something that you haven't done before. Take a good hard look at what hasn't worked in the past. And you've got to get to that acceptance first. That's the first hurdle. And I don't mean acceptance of the situation we've talked about before today. I mean, just accept that what you were doing wasn't working. And keep an open mind. Go into it with an open mind. And if you do go for it, follow the instructions. Don't do any more. Don't do any less. Just follow the steps as prescribed. And as someone who started this as an absolute cynic, but trusted a friend well enough to think, actually, if it worked for him, it could work for me, then I'm probably repeating myself here, but just trust that process, trust those steps. And what's really nice about it is you don't wait to the end of the 3 months and here's a gain. You do see an incremental improvement, and try it. Celebrate those early successes. But one thing I would want to say to anyone on this, because it was something that I was a bit daunted by, is you're not going to be expected to do everything on week one. What made this successful for me was that sort of incremental building block approach. If I tried to sit down with somebody and do the whole lot on week one, I'd have just been dwarfed and would have given up. It's that incremental steps and stages, excuse me, that I think made this a lot more successful.
Nice. And again, for you, I just with you talking then, and also when I was preparing for our call last night, it was actually in December that you actually got started. Okay, it was actually in December that you actually got started.
Yeah, it was a tough time to start, but we thought we'd go for it, didn't we? It's mid-December, wasn't it?
It was mid-December, right? And for a lot of guys, they've already signed out for the year. They've already signed off December, but for you, again, that just shows you how much that you really wanted to change, because from when people were giving up, you're like, no, I wanted to do it. So Rob, well done on your work. You should be really, really proud.
And thank you ever so much for your help and support.
The
key thing is it was a partnership.
Well, exactly right. It's a partnership. We help each other. Like with you, any struggles, I was there for you, but then I'm also there to, Rob, pull your socks up. We've got to do this, and that's what it is, right? It's a partnership. So
one thing I haven't mentioned that I think is really important is the peer group sessions that you do. Where we used to get onto the weekly call with everybody who was on the program at the same time, and sometimes you'd invite people onto those calls that were a bit further ahead or had just finished. And that really helped too, because it's quite nice to not just be, I'm doing this by myself with one guy. It's quite nice to be part of a group that are doing it. I think that's important to highlight.
Yeah, of course. Again, it's because, like in today's world, I know things are starting to change, but a lot of people are still working remotely, aren't they? So you don't get that camaraderie. You're not really seeing other people face to face. Okay, we do it online. But again, you're just in a group, isn't it?
That's not a group. No.
Yeah, and that's, you know, it's good just to speak, you know, in a safe space. You know, I remember, you know, you used to support each other. You know, you used to support each other in the group, which was really, really good. Really, really good to see.
Very nice bunch.
Yes, no, they are. They are. All the guys are. All the guys are, Rob. All the guys are. So again, thank you so much for taking your time out today, Rob. Really, really do appreciate it. Really, really do appreciate it. And for anyone that has been watching this and, you know, can feel that they can resonate with any of it at all, you know, with what Rob has shared about his, you know, his experiences, where he was at beforehand, or, you know, where he feels that, where you might feel that you might need some help and support going forwards, please do not hesitate to reach out to myself or Kerry, and just say the words "back in charge," and we will, you know, we will then show you the first steps, and we can just have an open conversation about whether it'll be a good partnership to move forwards. And again, thank you for joining in for the sustainability series. Again, this is a great series that I'm just looking forward to sharing, of men that have not only just made that change and, you know, got back in charge, but years on, they've actually managed to stay in charge as well. So again, thank you, Rob, for